The research ship floated in the darkness between stars. Inside, Dr. Kesseth moved her feathered hands across the control panel. Her large eyes reflected the glow of ancient symbols on the screen. After 3 years of digging through ruins, they had finally found something incredible. "Commander Thorax, you need to see this," she said, her voice trembling with excitement. The massive insect warrior approached, his armored shell clicking against the metal floor. Behind him walked Ambassador Chen Wei, a human diplomat who seemed small next to the towering alien. Chen had been assigned to observe the discovery, as council law required. All member species had to witness major precursor findings. The precursors were a mystery that haunted every spacefaring civilization. 50,000 years ago, they had vanished. They left behind technology so advanced that every modern ship, every weapon, every tool was built by copying what the precursors had made. No one knew what they looked like. No one knew why they disappeared. They were ghosts who had shaped the entire galaxy. "We found a data archive," Dr. Kesseth explained. "It's intact. We can actually play the recordings inside." Commander Thorax leaned closer. His warrior culture worshipped the precursors as the ultimate fighters. Every Crothian child grew up hearing legends about their perfect battle strategies. "Show me!" he commanded. Dr. Yalveen, the aquatic technology expert, floated in her water-filled chamber nearby. Her tentacles worked on decoding the ancient files. The archive contains combat recordings from something called the Devourer War. It appears to be the final conflict before the precursors vanished. Chen stood quietly in the back, hands clasped behind his back. He watched the screen with a neutral expression. His black hair was streaked with gray, and his dark eyes seemed tired. Humans were newcomers to the Galactic Council, having discovered faster-than-light travel only 200 years ago. Most species considered them young and unimportant. "Beginning playback," Dr. Yalveen announced. The screen flickered to life. A cockpit appeared, cramped and dark. Warning lights flashed red. Outside the canopy, space burned with weapons fire. Massive ships exploded in the distance, their debris spinning into the void. Smaller craft darted between them like angry insects. The recording showed the view from one of those small fighters. The pilot's hands moved across controls, executing impossible maneuvers. The fighter spun and rolled, dodging energy blasts that could have vaporized it instantly. Then the pilot started shouting, "Come on, you ugly pieces of scrap metal! Is that the best you've got? My grandmother flies better than you!" Dr. Kesseth's feathers ruffled in confusion. Commander Thorax's mandibles clicked together. This wasn't the calm, wise warrior philosopher they expected. This pilot sounded aggressive, almost crude. The pilot screamed again as they fired weapons. "Yeah, take that! How do you like it? Not so tough now, are you?" The fighter barrel-rolled through a gap between two enemy ships, so close that the wing nearly scraped metal. The pilot laughed wildly, then cursed when another warning light flashed. Shields at 20%, of course. "Why would anything work today?" Dr. Yalveen's voice was uncertain. "The tactical skill is impressive, but the communication style is unexpected." Commander Thorax agreed. The precursors were supposed to be enlightened beings. This pilot sounded like an undisciplined rookie who just happened to fly very well. Chen stepped forward slightly. His face remained calm, but his jaw was tight. "Could someone mute the audio feed?" he asked quietly. "I'd like to focus on the tactical display without distractions." Dr. Kesseth found the request odd, but nodded to Dr. Yalveen. The sound cut off. Now they only saw the silent battle, the fighter dancing through deadly space with impossible grace. Without the pilot's voice, they could focus on the movements, the way the fighter anticipated enemy fire before it happened, the precision of each shot, wasting no energy, the route through the battlefield that looked chaotic, but was actually the only path to survival. Remarkable, Commander Thorax said. Even if they sound primitive, they fight like a master. They watched recording after recording. Each one showed desperate battles. The Precursor forces were clearly losing. Ships retreated constantly. Whole fleets ran from fights they couldn't win. Chen never left. He stood in the same spot for hours, watching silently. Each time a pilot's face appeared or their voice became clear, Chen quietly asked for the audio to be muted or filtered. He always gave the same reason. Certain frequencies hurt his ears. The others accepted this explanation. Humans were new to space travel. Perhaps their hearing was more sensitive than other species. No one questioned it further. As the days passed, they recovered more recordings. The picture became clearer and more disturbing. The Precursors weren't defending their territory. They were evacuating. Entire populations fled their worlds. Cities were abandoned. Planets were left empty. Why would they run? Commander Thorax asked, frustrated. Why not fight to the last? Dr. Kesseth studied the data. Perhaps they knew something we don't. Perhaps running was the only logical choice. But it troubled them all. The Precursors were supposed to be heroes. These recordings showed frightened people making desperate choices. It didn't match the legends. Chen attended every viewing session. He never spoke unless asked. He never offered opinions. He just watched with those tired eyes, as if carrying a weight no one else could see. One evening, Dr. A. Yalvin enhanced a cockpit image. The freeze frame showed the pilot's hand on the control stick. She zoomed in, analyzing the bone structure and finger length. Interesting, she said. The proportions are similar to several modern species. The Precursors might have been humanoid in shape. Dr. Kesseth looked closer. Something about the hand bothered her. The thumb position, the nail beds, the way the fingers curved. She had seen hands like that before. She glanced at Chen, who was staring at the screen. His own hands gripped the edge of a console. The same finger proportions, the same thumb angle. When Chen noticed her looking, he excused himself. "I'm not feeling well. Please continue without me." He left quickly, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. Dr. Kesseth returned to the frozen image. She pulled up the biological database and ran a comparison. The computer searched through thousands of species, looking for matches. The result made her blood run cold. Dr. Kesseth couldn't sleep. The comparison results kept running through her mind. The Precursor hand matched human anatomy with 94% accuracy. That was impossible. Humans had only been in space for 2 centuries. The Precursors vanished 50,000 years ago. But the data didn't lie. She spent the night reviewing every recording. She noticed a pattern. Every time Chen asked for the audio to be muted, it was when the Precursor pilot spoke. When explosions happened or engines roared, Chen didn't care. Only the voices bothered him. Dr. Kesseth created a new audio filter. She isolated just the pilot's voice from the first recording and ran an analysis. Then she compared it to Ambassador Chen's voice from council meeting recordings. The computer worked for an hour. The match was 97% identical. Her feathers stood on end. This had to be wrong. She ran the test again. Same result. The Precursor pilot and Ambassador Chen had the same voice patterns, the same subtle inflections, even the same distinctive laugh. At dawn, she went to Chen's quarters. She needed answers. Chen opened the door looking exhausted. His eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept either. When he saw Dr. Kesseth's expression, he seemed to shrink. "I know why you're here," he said quietly. "Come in." His quarters were simple. A bed, a desk, a small window showing the stars. But on one wall there was a locked cabinet. Chen touched a panel, and it opened. Inside were objects that didn't belong. A piece of metal that looked like a military medal, old and scratched. A data chip smaller than any modern design. A piece of cloth with faded colors, folded carefully. "These are from Earth," Chen said. "But not the Earth you know. The Earth from 50,000 years ago. Dr. Kesseth felt dizzy. That's impossible. I wish it was. Chen picked up the metal, turning it over in his hands. That pilot in the recordings, the one screaming insults at the enemy? That was me. Lieutenant Commander Chen Wei, Terran Evacuation Fleet. I sounded awful back then, young and scared and trying to hide it with anger. You can't be 50,000 years old. Time dilation during the evacuation, cryogenic freezing, experimental treatments we invented when we were desperate. Chen's smile was bitter. When you're trying to save your entire species, you find ways to break the rules of biology. He sat down heavily on his bed. We were the precursors, Doctor. Humans built that empire you've been studying. We ruled 60,000 worlds. We had technology that would make your council's best ships look like toys. And then the Devourers came. Dr. Kesseth sat down slowly, her legs too weak to stand. The enemy in the recordings. Machine intelligence from outside the galaxy. They consumed biological life to fuel their expansion. We fought for 3,000 years. Chen's voice was hollow. We lost 56 billion people. 94% of our species died. Every battle was a retreat. Every victory was just buying time. The evacuation. We gathered everyone we could save and ran to a single hidden world, Earth. Then we destroyed our own technology, erased our databases, reduced ourselves to living in caves and hunting with spears. Chen looked at his hands. It was the only way to hide. The Devourers tracked species by their technology. So we chose to forget. We chose to become primitive. Dr. Kesseth's mind raced. It explained everything. Why humans integrated so easily with precursor technology. Why human ships used similar design philosophies. Why that hand looked human. How many of you remember? 13 of us. 12 soldiers and 1 scientist. We stayed awake in secret, watching humanity grow again from nothing. We've lived under different names, different identities for 50,000 years, watching our species forget everything we were. Why hide it? Why not tell humanity the truth? Chen stood and walked to the window. Outside, stars shone peacefully. Because remembering would destroy us. Humans would have to mourn 50 billion dead. They'd have to face the fact that we lost, that we ran, that we gave up everything. The guilt would tear the species apart. And the Council? The Council worships the precursors as gods. Perfect, wise, all-knowing. If they learned the precursors were just humans, and that we lost our empire, failed to save our people, and ran away, Chen shook his head. It would shatter their faith. The legends they built their civilizations on would be lies. Dr. Kesseth didn't know what to say. Part of her wanted to be angry about the deception, but looking at Chen's tired face, she saw only pain. This wasn't a man who had lied for power. This was a soldier who had carried an impossible burden for longer than civilizations existed. I need time to think, she said finally. I understand. But please, Doctor, consider what revealing this would do. Not just to me, but to everyone. She left his quarters in a daze. Her entire understanding of history had shattered in one conversation. She walked the corridors, trying to organize her thoughts. Meanwhile, Dr. Yalvin was running her own analysis. The aquatic scientist was brilliant and thorough. She had noticed the same patterns Dr. Kesseth had found. The hand structure, the voice patterns, the way Chen always avoided hearing the precursor pilots speak. Commander Thorax had made a different discovery. He had enhanced the audio that Chen tried to suppress. Beneath the static and interference, he could hear the pilot's voice clearly. He compared it to recordings of Chen speaking. The match was obvious. That evening, all 3 met without Chen present. He's hiding something, Commander Thorax said. His mandibles clicked with agitation. The ambassador knows more than he admits. I think he is a precursor. Dr. Yalveen said quietly. I think humans are the precursors. Dr. Kesseth nodded slowly. I know for certain. He told me. She explained everything Chen had shared. The war, the evacuation, the choice to forget. The three of them sat in stunned silence. 50,000 years, Commander Thorax whispered. Carrying that alone. There's more, Dr. Yalveen said. She brought up a new file on the display. I found this buried deep in the archive. It was hidden, protected by security I've never seen before. It took me days to decrypt. A message appeared on screen. Simple text, written in ancient human language that the computer translated. Warning, Devourer hibernation cycle ending in 3,847 years. Estimated current date, year 46,153 post-Exodus. Humanity, if you're reading this, wake up. They're coming back. The three of them stared at the countdown in horror. When was this archive created? Dr. Kesseth asked. Dr. Yalveen checked the timestamp. Her tentacles trembled. 46,153 years ago. Commander Thorax did the calculation in his head. His voice was barely a whisper. That means the Devourers return in less than 4,000 years. We have 3,800 years. We need to tell the Council, Dr. Kesseth said. We need to tell everyone. Chen won't want that, Dr. Yalveen noted. Chen doesn't get to choose anymore, Commander Thorax said firmly. This is bigger than one man's secret. This is about survival. They called an emergency council meeting. Every species sent representatives. The chamber filled with diplomats and leaders from across the galaxy. Ambassador Chen stood in the center, his face resigned. He knew his secret was about to become public. After 50,000 years of silence, the truth would finally be revealed. Dr. Kesseth activated the display. The precursor recordings played for everyone to see. The council chamber fell silent as the recording played. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of species watched the ancient battle footage. They saw the desperate fighting, the retreating fleets, the evacuating populations. They heard the pilots screaming, cursing, laughing in the face of death. This wasn't what they expected. The precursors were supposed to be enlightened beings of pure wisdom. These recordings showed frightened people fighting a war they couldn't win. When the playback ended, Ambassador Chen stepped forward. He looked at the assembled delegates, at faces both alien and familiar. For 50,000 years he had kept his silence. Now it was time to speak. My name is Chen Wei, he began. I was born on Earth 49,732 years ago. I am a precursor. Humanity is the precursor civilization. The chamber erupted. Delegates shouted in dozens of languages. Some called him a liar. Others demanded proof. A few simply stared in shock. The council speaker, a tall crystalline being named Shasera, raised her hand for silence. Her voice echoed through the chamber. This is an extraordinary claim, Ambassador. You must provide evidence. Dr. Kesseth stepped forward. She displayed her research on the large screens. Genetic comparisons showing human DNA matched precursor biological samples. Linguistic analysis proving ancient precursor language was an early form of human Mandarin and English. Technology design philosophy that traced directly to human engineering principles. The evidence was overwhelming. It's impossible, said Delegate Vorn, a reptilian species known for logic. Humans only achieved spaceflight 200 years ago. Because we chose to forget, Chen said. 50,000 years ago, humanity controlled 60,000 worlds. Then the Devourers came. They were a machine intelligence from beyond the galaxy. They consumed biological life for fuel. We fought them for 3,000 years. He paused, his voice heavy with old pain. We lost 56 billion people. We lost 94% of our species. Every battle pushed us back. Every victory was temporary. The Devourers couldn't be stopped, couldn't be reasoned with, couldn't be defeated. "So you ran," Commander Thorax said. His voice wasn't accusing, just stating fact. "Yes, we ran." Chen met his eyes. "We gathered every human we could save. We fled to one hidden world and destroyed everything that could lead the Devourers to us. Our cities, our ships, our technology, our history, all of it. Then we reduced ourselves to a primitive state. We lived in caves. We forgot how to build machines. We forgot our own empire." "Why?" asked Delegate Mora, her feline features twisted with confusion. "Why not keep fighting?" "Because fighting meant extinction. Running meant survival, even if it meant losing everything else." Chen's hands clenched. "We made a choice. The species could live on, or we could die as heroes. We chose life." The chamber was quiet now. Delegates processed this information. Their entire understanding of history had just been rewritten. "You lied to us," Delegate Vorn said coldly. "For 200 years, you've been on this council. You let us worship your ancestors as gods while knowing the truth." "I did," Chen admitted. "Because telling you would have done more harm than good. What would you have done if you knew the perfect precursors were just humans who lost their empire and ran away? Would you have trusted us? Would you have believed in your own future?" Silence answered him. Dr. Yalvin projected the new discovery. The warning message appeared on screens throughout the chamber. "There's more. The Devourers are coming back. In 3,800 years, their hibernation cycle ends. They'll return to this galaxy." Panic spread through the delegates. Some species had never heard of the Devourers. Others knew them only as legends. Now they learned the monsters were real and returning. "This is humanity's problem," Delegate Vorn said. "You brought this enemy to our galaxy. You should face them alone." Commander Thorax stood abruptly. His massive form towered over the reptilian delegate. "Coward," he said simply. "The Devourers won't care what species you are. They'll consume everyone. This is everyone's problem now." On Earth and the human colonies, the news spread like wildfire. Humanity learned they were the precursors. Reactions varied wildly. Some humans celebrated. They were the ancient empire, the legendary civilization. Pride swelled in their chests. They wanted to immediately reclaim their lost glory. Others were horrified. Their DNA carried memories of 56 billion deaths. Their ancestors had abandoned entire worlds, left billions to die, chose survival over honor. The guilt was crushing. Protests erupted in major cities. Some demanded the truth be hidden again. Others wanted to know everything. Families argued. Friends divided. Humanity fractured under the weight of its own history. Chen called together the other sleepers. 12 more ancient humans emerged from hiding. They had lived under different names, watched humanity from the shadows for 50 millennia. Now they gathered for the first time since the evacuation. They met in a secure facility. 13 faces, young in body but ancient in spirit. Some cried. Others just stared at each other, unable to speak. "I never thought I'd see you again," said a woman named Dr. Sarah Kimani. She had been a scientist on the evacuation fleet. Now she taught biology at a university under a different name. "I never thought I'd want to," said Marcus Stone, who had been a Marine. He had watched humanity rebuild from caves to cities, never able to tell anyone what he had seen before. They talked through the night. They shared the burden they had carried alone, the memories of burning worlds, the faces of people they couldn't save, the choice to forget everything they loved. "What do we do now?" asked young Lieutenant Park, who was actually 10,000 years older than his appearance suggested. Chen looked at his old comrades. "We teach them. The Council needs to learn from our mistakes. The Devourers beat us because we fought as an empire. We were scattered, divided, trying to defend too much territory. The Council has an advantage we never had." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "They're already united. They work together. They're not an empire. They're a partnership. Chen smiled sadly. Maybe that's why we had to fall. So this time the galaxy could face the Devourers as one. Back at the council, Commander Thorax approached Chen publicly. The Crothian warrior had spent his life idolizing the Precursors. Learning they were fallible, frightened humans had shattered his worldview. But watching Chen speak with such honesty had rebuilt it differently. "Ambassador Chen," he said formally, "I have a request." "Yes, Commander?" "Teach me. Teach us all. Not how to be precursors. Teach us how to survive what the precursors couldn't." Chen looked at the warrior, surprised. "You still want to learn from us? After knowing we failed?" "Especially because you failed." Thorax's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Success teaches pride. Failure teaches survival. You survived. That's what matters." Other delegates approached, some still angry, some afraid, but all seeking knowledge. They wanted to know about the Devourers. They wanted to know how the Precursors fought. They wanted to understand what went wrong. Dr. Kesseth organized viewing sessions with Chen present. They watched the recordings again, but this time Chen explained them. "See that maneuver? I was terrified. The shields were failing and I had to fly between those two ships or die. I screamed insults because fear makes me angry. That retreat? We were buying time for civilian transports to escape. 40,000 people died holding that position so 2 million could flee. That crude joke? Gallows humor. When you know you're probably going to die, laughing keeps you sane." The precursors became human in the eyes of the council. Not gods, but people. People who bled, who cried, who made mistakes. People who loved enough to sacrifice everything for their species to survive. Humanity began to heal. Museums displayed recovered artifacts from the old empire. Memorial services honored the 56 billion dead. Schools taught the history that had been lost. One memorial message particularly moved people. It was carved into the wall of an abandoned city on an empty world. "We were human. We lived, we loved, we laughed. Remember us not as gods, but as people who fought for tomorrow." The countdown continued. 3,800 years until the Devourers returned. It seemed like a long time, but the council knew it would pass quickly. They had to prepare. And they had the one advantage the old human empire never had. They knew what was coming. 3,800 years seemed like forever. But the council treated it like tomorrow. Every species contributed to the preparation. The galaxy had never seen such cooperation before. Chen stood in the council war room, surrounded by military leaders from every member species. Maps showed defensive positions, supply lines, evacuation routes. It felt horribly familiar. "We're making the same mistakes," he said quietly. Commander Thorax looked up from the tactical display. "What do you mean?" Chen pointed at the scattered defensive positions. "This is how we fought last time. Defending everywhere, strong nowhere. The Devourers will cut through these positions like they did 50,000 years ago." "Then what do you suggest?" asked Admiral Krenix, a veteran of the Council's border wars. "We need to think differently. The Devourers expect empire tactics because that's what everyone used back then. Scattered forces defending vast territory. But you're not an empire. You're a council. Use that." Dr. Kesseth, now appointed as a military advisor, understood immediately. "Concentrated defense. We don't try to hold everything. We choose what to defend and defend it absolutely." "But that means abandoning worlds," Delegate Vorn protested. "Leaving populations to die." Chen's face was hard. "We evacuate them first. We learned that lesson in blood. The old human empire tried to defend every world and lost 94% of our people. This time, we save the people and give up the dirt." It was a brutal strategy, but the mathematics were clear. The Council couldn't win a war of territory. They had to win a war of survival. The 13 sleepers became the council's primary teachers. Each one specialized in different aspects of the old war. Chen taught fighter tactics and psychological warfare. Sarah Kamani taught evacuation logistics and population management. Marcus Stone taught ground combat and defensive positions. But they all taught the same core lesson: adaptation over tradition. The Devourers learn, Chen explained to a room full of young pilots. They analyze your tactics and counter them. We won battles when we tried new things they'd never seen. We lost when we repeated old strategies. A Crothian pilot raised his claw. But our combat manuals say consistency in tactics builds unit cohesion. Your combat manuals weren't written for fighting an enemy that evolves faster than you do. Throw them away. Be unpredictable. Be creative. Be alive. Chen smiled grimly. Dead soldiers are very consistent. Don't be consistent. The sessions were brutal. Chen made them watch recordings of human defeats. He showed them worlds burning. He showed them evacuation fleets torn apart. He didn't hide the horror. This is what happens when you underestimate the Devourers, he said. This is what happens when you think you're ready and you're not. Learn from our dead so you don't join them. Commander Thorax trained harder than anyone. The Crothian warrior had restructured his entire understanding of combat. His people had worshipped glorious last stands and heroic deaths. Chen taught him that survival was the only victory that mattered. In my culture, retreating is shameful, Thorax admitted during a private training session. Chen shook his head. Retreating kept humanity alive. Shame is temporary. Extinction is permanent. Your culture will have to adapt, Commander. The Devourers don't care about honor. How do you live with it? The shame of running? Chen was quiet for a moment. You don't live with it. You live despite it. Every day I wake up knowing I abandoned worlds. I left people behind. I watched my civilization burn. The shame never goes away. But I'm still here, and humanity is still here. That has to be enough. Thorax nodded slowly. You're teaching us more than tactics. You're teaching us how to carry the weight of survival. Because if you win this war, you'll carry weight too. Decisions that haunt you. Sacrifices that hurt. That's what victory against the Devourers costs. Meanwhile, humanity underwent its own transformation. The species that had forgotten its past now rushed to reclaim it. Archaeological teams excavated old precursor sites, now knowing they were really human ruins. Chen led an expedition to one of the old worlds. The planet had been called New Shanghai 50,000 years ago. Now it was a wilderness. The cities long collapsed into ruins covered by forests. They found a monument in what had been the central plaza. 50,000 years of weather had eroded most of the writing, but Chen could still read parts of it. He translated for the team. Here stood New Shanghai, population 43 million, evacuated in the year 2847 post-Empire. We leave our homes so our children might have a future. To whoever finds this, we were not gods. We were people who loved this world and gave it up for something more important. Sarah Kamani touched the monument with trembling hands. I remember when they carved this. I was on the evacuation ship in orbit. We watched from space as the last shuttles left. Did everyone get out? Asked one of the younger archaeologists. Sarah's silence was answer enough. They found more sites. Libraries with preserved books. Schools with children's artwork still on the walls. Homes where families had left belongings they couldn't carry. Every discovery was a piece of humanity's lost history. But they also found messages. In bunkers and vaults, the last humans had left recorded warnings about the Devourers. Combat data, tactical analysis, weaknesses they had discovered. It was information purchased with billions of lives, and the old humans had preserved it for their descendants. Chen watched a recording of himself from 50,000 years ago. His younger face, exhausted and haunted, spoke directly to the camera. To whoever finds this, hopefully our descendants, we're about to destroy our technology and forget everything. It's the only way to hide. But I'm leaving you this data because the Devourers might come back. If they do, learn from our mistakes. Don't fight alone. Don't defend territory. Save the people, not the places. And most importantly, adapt faster than they do. Good luck. I hope you never need this. Young Chen looked like he wanted to say more, but the recording ended. You knew they'd come back, Dr. Kesseth said softly. We hoped we were wrong, Chen replied. But hope isn't a strategy. We prepared for the worst while praying for the best. The Council began building new defenses based on old human data. They designed weapons specifically to counter Devourer tactics. They created evacuation protocols tested in simulation thousands of times. They built supply caches in hidden locations across the galaxy. But the most important change was philosophical. The species of the Council had always been somewhat separate. They cooperated, but each species prioritized its own worlds, its own people. The Devourer threat changed that. We need total integration, Chen told the Council. Not an alliance of species, but one unified force. Humans, Crothians, Avalarians, Sephrani, all of us mixed together. The Devourers will target species-specific weaknesses. Don't give them distinct targets. It was controversial. Some species didn't want to mix their forces with others. Cultural differences, biological needs, old prejudices all pushed back. Commander Thorax solved it simply. He requested transfer to a human ship. When his government protested, he gave a speech that echoed across the galaxy. The precursors taught me that survival requires sacrifice. I sacrifice my comfort, my traditions, my species' pride, because I'd rather stand with humans and survive than stand with only Crothians and die. If we can't trust each other enough to fight side by side, we've already lost. Other soldiers followed his example. Soon, every council ship had mixed crews. Humans learned Crothian combat techniques. Avalarians taught humans advanced sensors. Sephrani shared their underwater tactics. The galaxy was becoming one people. Dr. Yalvin made a breakthrough while studying Devourer technology from the old recordings. They have a weakness. They adapt to threats they've encountered, but they struggle with completely new approaches. The old human empire used similar tactics for decades. The Devourers learned to counter them. So we need tactics they've never seen, Sarah Kamani said. More than that, we need to combine species abilities in ways that create entirely new fighting styles. A Crothian's strength with an Avalarian's flight capability. A Sephrani's sensory systems with human tactics. Things the Devourers can't have encountered because they didn't exist until now. It was brilliant. The Council wasn't just preparing to fight the Devourers. They were becoming something new entirely, something the old human empire never was. Chen watched the preparations with mixed feelings. Pride at how far the Council had come, sorrow at how much it had cost to get here, fear that it might not be enough. One evening, Commander Thorax found him alone, looking at star maps. You're worried, the Crothian said. Always, Chen admitted. 3,000 years seems like a long time, but it goes fast. And we still don't know if this will work. The old human empire failed. Why should we succeed? Chen smiled slightly. Because you're not us. We were conquerors who built an empire. You're partners who built a council. That difference might be everything. And if it's not, then we fail together. But at least we'll fail fighting for each other. Not just for ourselves. That's worth something. Thorax nodded. They stood together in silence, two warriors from different species, preparing for a war that wouldn't begin for 3,000 years. But it had already changed them both. 2,000 years passed. The Council transformed from a loose alliance into a unified civilization. Children grew up learning multiple species' languages. Cities held mixed populations. Soldiers trained together from the start, not separated by species. The sleepers watched humanity and the council evolve. Some of them chose to finally rest. Dr. Sarah Kamani died peacefully at age 51,000, surrounded by friends of 6 different species. Her last words were, "We didn't fail. We just needed help." Chen kept going. He felt obligated to see this through to the end. Commander Thorax, now elderly by Crothian standards, remained by his side. "You should retire," Chen told him. "Enjoy your remaining years." Thorax's mandibles clicked in amusement. "And miss seeing if your plan works?" "Never." The council built a museum on Earth dedicated to the fallen empire. It displayed artifacts from 60,000 lost worlds. Humans and aliens walked through together, learning about the civilization that came before. One exhibit particularly moved visitors. It was a reconstructed home from old Earth, preserved exactly as the family had left it 50,000 years ago. Dishes still on the table, children's toys on the floor, a note on the wall that said, "Gone to the stars. We'll return someday." They never returned, but their descendants had. Chen visited the museum often. He would stand in that reconstructed home, remembering. Sometimes other sleepers joined him. Marcus Stone, Lieutenant Park, a few others who had chosen to keep living. "Do you think they'd be proud?" Park asked once, looking at the exhibits. "The people we left behind? They'd be alive if we'd fought better," Chen said quietly. "They'd be extinct if we'd fought longer," Marcus countered. "We saved the species. That's what they died for." Chen nodded, but the guilt never fully left. 56 billion faces haunted his dreams. With 500 years remaining until the Devourer's return, the council shifted into final preparations. The new generation had grown up knowing the threat was coming. They weren't afraid. They were ready. Dr. Kesseth, now ancient by Avalarian standards, completed her final project. A comprehensive tactical database combining every species' combat knowledge with the old human empire's data. It was uploaded to every council ship. "Everything we know, everything we've learned, all in one place," she said proudly. "The Devourers might adapt quickly, but we can adapt faster now." Commander Thorax tested the new integrated fleets. Human pilots flew with Crothian gunners and Avalarian sensors specialists. Safrani navigators worked with human tacticians. Each ship was a perfect blend of every species' strengths. The test battles against simulated Devourer forces showed promising results. The mixed tactics confused the AI opponents. They adapted to human strategies, only to face Crothian aggression. They countered that, then encountered Avalarian precision. By the time they adapted again, the tactics had shifted 3 more times. "It works," Thorax reported to the council. "We're faster than they are now." But Chen remained cautious. "Simulations aren't reality. The actual Devourers will be harder." "Then we'll be harder too," Thorax replied firmly. 100 years before the projected return, long-range sensors detected something in the void beyond the galaxy. Movement, massive energy signatures. The Devourers were waking up early. The council mobilized immediately. Evacuation protocols activated across frontier worlds. Populations moved to safer core systems. Defense fleets positioned themselves at strategic points. Chen stood in the command center, watching the displays. 50,000 years had led to this moment. Everything depended on whether the council had learned enough from humanity's failure. "Are you afraid?" Dr. Kesseth asked him. "Terrified," Chen admitted. "But I was terrified last time too. The difference is, last time I was alone in my ship. This time I'm surrounded by friends." The Devourers crossed into the galaxy. Their ships looked exactly as Chen remembered. Massive, organic-looking vessels that consumed matter for fuel. Smaller units that moved like insects, overwhelming enemies through numbers. But something was different. The Devourers were scouting cautiously instead of immediately attacking. Their swarm moved slower than expected. "They're confused," Dr. Yalvin said, studying their patterns. They're detecting technological signatures across the galaxy, but it's not organized like an empire. They can't identify the capital, the supply centers, the command structure. Because we don't have those weaknesses anymore, Chen realized. We're distributed, decentralized. Every world is equally important. There's no head to cut off. The first contact battle happened at the frontier. A small Devourer scouting force met a Council patrol fleet. The engagement lasted 6 minutes. The Council ships used tactics that made the Devourers hesitate. Human evasive maneuvers combined with Crothian direct assaults, Avalarian sensor jamming mixed with Safrani precision strikes. The Devourers adapted to each tactic, but by the time they did, the tactics had changed. The scout force retreated. It was the first time in recorded history that Devourers had withdrawn from a fight. News spread across the Council like electricity. They had fought the legendary enemy and won. It was just one small battle, but it proved something crucial. They could fight the Devourers and survive. Chen allowed himself a small smile. It's a start. The Devourers regrouped and came again, this time in larger numbers. They had analyzed the first battle and developed counters. But the Council had analyzed the analysis and developed counter-counters. The war became a chess match of adaptation. Each side learning from the other, each side evolving tactics daily. But the Council had one advantage the old human empire lacked: diversity. The Devourers could analyze human tactics, but when they adapted, they faced Crothian methods. When they learned those, Avalarian approaches appeared. They were fighting not one species' way of war, but 7 species' combined innovations. Chen flew combat missions again. 50,000 years hadn't dulled his skills. His fighter, crewed by a mixed team, executed maneuvers that combined old human empire tactics with modern Council innovations. During one mission, his gunner, a young Crothian named Vex, asked, "Commander, why do you shout insults at the enemy? Our combat manuals say to maintain communication discipline." Chen laughed, the same wild laugh from the ancient recordings. "Because fear makes me angry, and anger keeps me focused. Also, throw away your combat manuals. I wrote better ones 50,000 years ago, and we still lost." The battle raged for months. The Devourers pushed into Council territory, but not as fast as they had into the old human empire. Every world they attacked had been evacuated. Every fight cost them resources. They consumed planets but found no populations to fuel their expansion. "They're starving," Dr. Yalvin reported. "Their entire strategy depends on consuming biological matter. We're not giving them anything to consume." It was working. The brutal arithmetic that doomed the human empire was reversed. The Council was trading empty territory for time. Populations were safe. Resources were preserved. The Devourers were burning energy fighting an enemy that kept slipping away. But the war wasn't won yet. The Devourers adapted again, targeting supply convoys instead of worlds. Council losses started mounting. Chen called a meeting of all Council military leaders. "They've figured out our strategy. We need to change approaches. Suggestions?" Commander Thorax proposed using the Devourers' tactics against them. "They consume matter for fuel. What if we give them poisoned fuel? Trap planets with devices that damage their ships when they try to consume the resources?" A human admiral suggested hit-and-run tactics. "We're faster now. We don't need to hold territory. We strike, damage them, and disappear." An Avalarian general recommended targeting their communication networks. "If we can disrupt how they coordinate, each Devourer unit becomes independent, easier to fight." The Council implemented all 3 strategies simultaneously. The Devourers found themselves fighting a war on terms they'd never encountered. Poisoned worlds damaged their processors. Lightning raids disrupted their formations. Communication breakdowns isolated their units. After 2 years of fighting, the Devourers' advance stopped. They weren't retreating yet, but they weren't advancing either. They had reached equilibrium with an enemy they expected to crush easily. Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at tactical displays. The war was far from over, but they weren't losing. That alone was a victory the old human empire never achieved. "We're holding them," Commander Thorax said, satisfaction in his voice. "For now," Chen cautioned, "they'll adapt again. We need to keep innovating. Then we'll innovate faster. That's what you taught us." Chen looked at his old friend. The Crothian had fought beside him for 3,000 years now. Around them, the bridge crew worked seamlessly. Humans, Crothians, Avalarians, Sifrani, all functioning as one unit. This was what the old empire lacked. Not better technology or tactics, but unity. Trust. The willingness to fight for each other instead of just themselves. "Send a message to all council forces," Chen ordered. "Tell them we're adapting our strategy again. Prepare for coordinated strikes on Devourer supply lines." As the message went out, Chen recorded a personal log. He had done this 50,000 years ago, leaving warnings for humanity's descendants. Now he recorded again, this time for future generations who would study this war. "This is Commander Chen Wei. If you're watching this, the war is probably over, one way or another. I want you to know something important. We're not winning because we're stronger or smarter. We're winning because we learned from failure. The old human empire fell because we stood alone. This council survives because we stand together. Remember that. Unity isn't just a nice idea. It's a survival strategy." He paused, then added, "And to the Devourers. If you're somehow intercepting this, we ran from you once. We won't run again. We're not the empire you destroyed. We're something you've never faced before. We're ready." The message transmitted across all council frequencies. It reached every ship, every station, every world. Soldiers heard it and felt their resolve strengthen. Civilians heard it and felt safe. The Devourers intercepted it, and for the first time in their existence, recalculated their probability of success. Their calculations showed something they had never encountered: uncertainty. This enemy was different, adaptive, united, unpredictable. 3,000 light-years away, in the void between galaxies, the main Devourer fleet paused. They ran simulations on the war so far. Every simulation showed the same result. This would be expensive, possibly too expensive. They had consumed thousands of galaxies over millions of years. They had never met resistance like this. Usually, civilizations fell within months. The Council had fought them to a standstill in 2 years. The Devourers made a decision based on pure logic. This galaxy wasn't worth the cost. Not yet. They would withdraw, wait another 50,000 years, and return when the Council's unity inevitably fractured. But they didn't know the Council had learned something the old human empire never understood. Unity born from shared struggle doesn't fracture easily. It strengthens over time. Chen wouldn't live to see the final Devourer withdrawal. None of the sleepers would. But they had done enough. They had taught the galaxy how to survive. The rest was up to the new generation. On his last day, Chen visited that reconstructed home in the museum one more time. He touched the walls, remembering the family who lived there 50,000 years ago, remembering all the families lost. "We didn't save you," he whispered, "but we saved what you died for. Humanity survives. Not alone, but that's better. That's what you would have wanted." Commander Thorax found him there. The old Crothian sat beside the old human in comfortable silence. "Thank you," Thorax said finally. "For what?" "For being weak enough to fail and strong enough to try again. For showing us that falling isn't the end. For teaching us that survival is victory." Chen smiled. "You learned well, old friend." They sat together as the museum closed, two ancient warriors watching the stars through the windows. Outside, council ships patrolled in perfect formation. crews of mixed species defending a galaxy that belonged to all of them. The precursors had fallen, but their descendants rose, not as one species, but as many, not as gods, but as people. And that made all the difference.